podcast. I think today will be a very interesting discussion. It's a bit of a change for my audience. Like I've recently I had on some ex CIA spies. I've had on some top hackers
Uh-huh.
in the world that have done things that are just insane. They're so out of reach that people can't even believe it, right? And today we have a marketing specialist, right? That shifts gears a little bit, but it's very valuable information.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. And yeah, I'm glad, I think, it's good to, maybe like a topic that is not the day to day of the podcast, but I'm sure, a lot of people are not only, geeking out about cybersecurity, but also how to grow the company, how to get more clients. B2E has its particular, it's interesting and has a particular way, long sales cycles, and especially cybersecurity. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, definitely. So, I start everyone off with telling their background, right? And now it's not an IT background, obviously, but what did you get started in? What made you kind of go down the marketing path? Was it like an easy next step where, it's kind of like you're in college, you're in university, and you want to go into the business realm, and marketing is kind of just like the easiest route to get in there, and then you stick there.
Yeah, not necessarily. I was actually going to be a lawyer. I grew up
Okay.
in Venezuela, but I always, kind of knew that I would end up living in the US. So I decided not to go for law school in Caracas because then, I would have had to do 10 years again or whatever in the US, right? So it's like, okay, let's do communications. I like sports a lot. So I started as a sports journalist. And then, I didn't like journalism that much, but I did like the sports aspect. I started building websites, sports statistics. And really a publisher, like trying to be like the ESPN of Venezuela, and baseball is big, in Venezuela, so try to build around that, and then I started learning about digital marketing, right? Okay, how do we drive traffic to these pages? I saw the amount of data that was available, and that's really how I got into it, and I loved it, and I loved the amount of data that was available. I moved then to Chicago to get a master's in digital marketing. Worked in a couple of agencies there, and then I started Condor, uh, around 8 years ago. And out of coincidence, our first couple of clients were not only in B2B but in tech services, offering a few cybersecurity products. So we focus on that niche, and that's the story behind how we got into it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple things there that you said, right? Where, you followed your passion to some extent. You kind of I really relate to you going to university to actually be a lawyer, right? Because I started my university career, I guess, trying to be a doctor, right? And then I figured out, oh, I can't pass chemistry, biology, and calculus all at the same time. I kind of have to choose. Oh, and physics. I left one out, right? Like, let's make it as hard as possible in one semester. And of course, I'm not going to pass them all. Um, but you shifted your approach, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there that go to the university and they tell people around them, they tell their family, their friends, their close ones, yeah, I'm gonna go be a doctor, I'm gonna go be a lawyer, right? And maybe those people believe in them too, and now they
Hmm.
feel stuck, right? And they feel stuck because they don't want to do it anymore, they can't do it, right? And they don't want to switch. And so, like, I personally know people that went to med school, didn't like get a apprenticeship or whatever it is, being a doctor, or someone that tried to get into med school 3 4 5 times and didn't get in, and they just couldn't give it up, right? So being able to assess and be honest with yourself and shift, right? Because that's a scary thing, and it's something that a lot of people don't really talk about.
Yeah, and for me, more than shifting, let's say one majors or even career path, is was really getting into uh, entrepreneurship, right? Like having to hire. people, right? Having to hire agencies. That's really what changed the game for me. Because whether you are in marketing or in law, or like if you, um, yeah, there's different in mindset in the attitude, in the grind, in the not to take no for an answer when you work for a company and when you are really going at it on your own, right? So for me, that was crucial. But yeah, I hear you, and there's a lot of things. For example, I think in marketing, a lot of that happens too, right? A lot of people go to college for marketing, but a lot of people end up in marketing because, again, they need it to grow the business, right? So whether you are the founder or whether you are the practice leader and the expert, ultimately, I always say marketing is easy to learn, relatively easy to learn. Yeah, there's some technicalities and stuff, but like ultimately, the important thing is way more important to know the industry, the business, your company, your differentiators, your competition. uh, and then it will be relatively easy to adapt that and do good marketing.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say it like that, because so I started this podcast 4.5 years ago at this point, right? I didn't really put any money behind it in terms of marketing because I always just thought over time it'll grow, it'll develop, I don't have to do anything, right? It'll snowball. And that's true to an extent, but at how the internet is nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
At how saturated the space is, you actually need to, put some marketing behind it and whatnot. And recently, um, when I actually started to do that, I mean, I've seen my platform grow, from a very small amount of subscribers relatively to, you know, being very quickly to be one of the top, security podcasts. I have the content, right? Like I feel like the interview quality is there,
Mm-hmm.
but the numbers weren't there, right? And so once I shifted, and I was like, well, I have nothing to lose, like why don't I put a couple $100 towards this thing, and if it doesn't work, what does it matter,
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, or maybe not of course, but thankfully, it's paying off. And now I kind of like learned a little bit better, like, oh, okay, I actually have to market myself,
And yeah, I love to hear that it worked out. What did you do what did you do differently?
Yeah, so there's a few things, right? So the mentality behind my podcast is that I am not afraid to change things, try new things, right? Completely remove them or whatever it might be. Um, because my view is I have nothing to lose, right? I have nothing to lose. If it works out, great. I have everything to gain. If it doesn't work out, I'm in the same spot. So what does it matter, Um, and so I really shifted my approach to content overall, right?
Hmm.
I bring on people that I'm interested in talking to that have interesting experiences, a variety of experience. You know, YouTube Shorts has been real big for the channel lately. Chopping up the longer form podcasts
Hmm.
into smaller, 5-15 minute,
Hmm.
content segments, right? Like that's helpful. And it happens naturally, right? Like I'm sure that we just did 2-3 segments right there, right? And it's gonna, work itself out, but and also automating that to an extent where, because I have a full-time job, right? Like this isn't my full-time job or anything like that. I have two little kids at home. So it's like I need to kind of like upload this file and have, some magic behind the scenes that does everything for me. So really, I think doing that, getting that content pipeline down, and then adding on the marketing budget, right, for ads and whatnot, Google ads, YouTube ads, which honestly, until a couple months ago, I didn't even know that that was a thing, to
Yeah,
be completely
yeah,
honest. Um, Adding that on, right? Like I think that's what's, completely attributed
yeah.
to it, right? And now I'm working through or thinking through like a content life cycle, right? So I'm doing all these podcasts. Well, what if someone wants to, read a blog about a topic that we talked about on this show, right? On marketing or something like that. And maybe they discover the blog before the podcast, so here's the link to the podcast and all that sort of stuff, right? So working through all of that, and that's something completely different from what I'm used to, completely different from what I'm trained on, right? So it's definitely been a learning experience.
Yeah. No, and as you mentioned, you need both, right? Because you can do all of that, but if you don't have a good product, if you don't have good content, good guests, good conversations, I mean, it won't work, So,
Right.
but yeah, you can have a good conversation, and it will definitely take more time to grow organically. You could do it, right? But you need a lot more patience, and a lot of times, I think a misconception is like, well, I'm not spending any money. No, you are. I mean, here you have to find the guest, right? You have to pre-interview, prepare the episode, then you have to record it, then you have to edit it and publish it, and you redistribute it. I mean, there's a few hours, for one episode, it's a few hours, right? So as you mentioned, if you already, I don't know how much you want to put on an hourly basis. If you want to put $100, $500, or whatever it might be, right? But then I don't know. Let's say it adds to 500. I don't know, whatever. Just put a couple hundred extra to go from, you know probably multiply by 3, 5, or even 10x, the reach that you have, just by increasing, let's call it, the budget by a third. So I think you hit the nail in the head with well, by going with those promotion channels. And I think that's again, it's something that it's often, yeah, there's a misconception, people, not only with podcasts but in general with content, right? Used to be old school blog posts, but now it's like videos and white papers and um, interviews and guides and lead magnets. And yeah, it's great content, but then they don't go that extra mile, right, to really 10x the output.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I kind of want to get your take on this, right? How do you market yourself if you're just an individual trying to get out there, right? Because in the space right now, um, really the market is oversaturated with professionals and there's not
Mm,
enough jobs available for everyone.
mhm,
And so you're constantly in a situation where it's you up against hundreds of other candidates.
mhm,
And what can you do just starting out, maybe with little money or no money, to separate yourself beyond the skills, right? Is it just
mhm.
regular posts, or in your opinion, right? Because that's like personal marketing, that's like personal branding. And I feel like everyone needs personal branding to some extent. Like they need to be able to, so a potential employer needs to be able to look them up and say, oh, they
Mhm.
have a GitHub repository. Let's go look at their GitHub projects, or
Mhm.
oh, they did this body of work. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to specialize, have a very niche, right? So, for example, if in marketing, you cannot talk about all things marketing, especially if you're not the most famous guru of marketing, which even I don't think there is one, right? Like there's some people that are well known, like Gary Vee, for example. He's more like, even
Mhm.
him is more in like social media, right? And especially like, if again, that's not going to be the case of the people that are listening or the people that you're providing this advice, right? So really focus on either an industry or a topic that industry, and even better if it's both, right? And then start providing essentially free advice, on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, YouTube channel. uh, Not dumb it down, but yeah, tell the story in a way that it's understood. I think in particular tech services, people get into the industry jargon, and at the end, it's humans that are consuming the information, right? So the more human you are, the more, if you talk like a normal person, right? Uh, and obviously you provide value in terms of the content that you're sharing. I think that's the most important thing, and especially now, with AI, and in particular, people finding their answers in ChatGPT, or even when they're going to Google, they're finding their answers in the AI summaries of Google, right? When they go to a human instead of going to ChatGPT or Google summaries, it's because they don't want an encyclopedia out of a human, right? Like you're not gonna compete with ChatGPT, right? You want to, you want to bring like a strong point of view based on your experience, based on the work that you've done with clients, based on the project that you're working now, what's working exactly how, right? ChatGPT doesn't have access to necessarily to that information, so it's going one layer deeper, right? And really be the thought leader, and hopefully have some even original research, original data, right? Even if it's, for example, in this case, your podcast, right? If you do a white paper based on 100 interviews with IT executives, that's your original research, right? And then, perhaps even ChatGPT will cite you as opposed to, just saying like, okay, why is cybersecurity important, right? Those type of questions, those are being answered by ChatGPT. But like, okay, cybersecurity for digital marketing agencies of this size that are dealing with clients that are HIPAA compliant, okay, now you got my attention. And me, if I'm a digital marketing agency that work, that I'm interested in that, I'm going to follow that person, right? I'm going to follow that person, and I'm going to really look up to him as the expert in that, because there's probably no other person that is branding themselves like that. And when I need that, I'm going to reach out to him, right? So, I mean, I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And when you break it down like that, um, it almost sounds too easy, too common sense, right? And I'll say it because I heard someone tell me recently, right, that he wanted to do something unique, something that hasn't been done before. Why waste my time, on something that there's a thousand other companies for and whatnot? um and I had to explain it to him like this, like, look, you could spend 40, 50, 60 years creating something brand new, right? And you absolutely could. Or you could take a template from other people, take that template and tweak it, make it your own, and build off of that, right? There's two different ways about it,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of thrown off, right? Because I immediately gave him the example, so like I have obviously the South Security Consulting LLC, and I actually provide some consulting services to different companies, large and small. No, not a marketing gig, right? But I gave him that example, right? Where, like, hey, I'm a one person company. I have a specialty in this area. I do
Mm-hmm.
it really well. It's proven, right? Companies have paid me to do it for them and whatnot. Why would I start that LLC with that same mindset? Because I mean, there's a big four, right? PwC, Deloitte, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
KPMG, EY, right? Why am I going to be chosen above and
Mm-hmm.
beyond them, right? And there's differentiators for sure. I mean, you're not spending $500 an hour with me, right? Like, if my time gets that valuable, that'll be something really impressive. But it is not that valuable. Um, but you have to not be afraid of doing the same thing a little different, making it your own, and growing and building it out. I have a friend that did the exact same thing. He actually started his company right around the same time that I started mine, and he's built it out to a pretty good sized managed services provider. And I mean, he has a lot of customers, a lot of clients. I mean, we started at the same time. He just approached it differently, and he had different backing and whatnot. And I'm learning as I go, right? He had more experience in that area than me.
Mm-hmm.
Still, we both have value in the marketplace.
No, totally. And that's one of the things that coming from a different country, I moved to the US in my 20s. And obviously, I knew, or I thought I knew what I was getting into in terms of, okay, this is the biggest economy in the world and the opportunities, but also, everything is invented. you could think, right? It's like, as you mentioned, right? You want to get into an industry. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have been doing services in that industry for years, but there's a space, and that's what I realized when I was working in the other agencies in Chicago. They were serving enterprise customers, and I saw the type of work that that we would do for mid-market companies, and they're like, ah, no, they're unimportant, right? If they're not, Fortune 1000 companies, it's like we don't really care. And
Right.
I understand, right? Because they have so big, the big whales is for 1,000. So percentage wise in their revenue, in their growth, it doesn't mean much. But for me, it would have meant a lot. A $30,000 project for me would have meant a lot. Would have,
Yeah.
you know. So that's then okay, I'm not competing, to go with Fortune 1000 companies. I'm positioning to add value to mid market, right? Which, not to say that I'm the only agency doing that, but there's room, right? Especially when you bring certain experience and you can say that you've worked with enterprise before. So every person, they have to find that unique experience and positioning to add value to that niche. And yeah, I listen to one of the podcasts that they help you find a vertical. It's called deep specialization, and they always say, the riches are in the niches. You need to, you cannot be everything for everybody, but if you find the right niche with the right knowledge to provide them, and the way to add value, you could really grow, your business just by focusing on the right, again, in the right niche. So
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you said that because I talked to someone last week that is a he is slash was a malware researcher, right? And we're both in security. We're both in the same field technically, right? Um, but we have two very different specialties.
yeah.
And he told me straight up, he's like, if a client came to me and said that I needed cloud security services or a cloud security assessment, I'd be directing them to you. I'm not taking on that.
Yeah.
My specialty is on breaking down, malware, reverse engineering it, knowing it inside and out, providing fixes for it, all that sort of stuff, right? And those are two very different niches. And this is actually why I love cybersecurity because there's so many different specialties that you could go into
Hmm.
that have completely different skill sets. I mean, the tools that he uses, I know of the tools and everything, right? The last time I used any of those tools were in 2017, 2018 when I was getting my master's degree, and they kind of give you that, 100-foot view of the domain, right?
Hmm.
But I haven't fired that stuff up since then. I haven't touched it. I've thought about doing it, but then I'm like, man, I actually know how much work that goes into that. I'm not doing it, right? Because that's a whole niche, that's a whole
Hmm.
specialty, and I feel like everyone has one, and it can be the same, as other people. You have to approach it differently.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And then people they will see you as the authority, right? It's like when I was telling you I started as a journalist and as a sports journalist, and let's say you do that today, right? Do you think you're gonna get somewhere just tweeting, "Oh, the Yankees won," this guy, they had a great start with this guy. They're pitching well. Their starting pitchers are great or not. That's what thousands of comments are already saying. But let's say you focus on elbow injuries, right? For pitchers, and really understand that, right? And really write about that. And then the other writers that have been there for years, when there is an injury and they want to know exactly how much time the pitcher is going to be out, they're going to look for you, right? They're going to follow you and they're going to cite you and they're going to see you as the expert. But you cannot be wasting your time talking about home runs and who are the favorites to win the division and trades and budgets. No, you need to focus and then focus on not only injuries, but elbow injuries for pitcher, for example, or maybe injuries enough. I don't know. I think each person will get to decide what's niche enough. But usually, when in doubt, err on the side of, you know, narrow even more.
Yeah. Yeah. You said two things there that I want to touch on, right? So, one, it's interesting you brought up the sports, journalism part, right? Because when we, that's 100% correct. There's 1,000 people out there that are saying the Yankees won, this happened, there's an injury, whatever, right? And then you go and look at Adam Schefter and his posts, right? He has that inside the locker room
Yeah,
feel. This guy is talking to
yeah,
the trainer that's diagnosing this
yeah.
guy. He's talking to the doctor that's going to perform the surgery. He's talking to the coaches and, everyone, right? He's talking to all of them. So there's 1,000 different people, millions probably, just saying the basic stuff. And then you have Adam Schefter, who's the authority, right? Who goes on ESPN, who goes on Pat McAfee's show, who goes on all these different platforms and gives the literal truth, right, of
Yeah, yeah.
exactly what it is and what you can expect, when he can expect to come back, what's he doing in the off season to rehab and everything. I mean, like that insight, is invaluable to a super fan. Like I'm telling you right now, I'm a huge Bears fan, right? Something happens to Caleb Williams, which I hope never happens, right?
Mm,
I want to know every day, right? What's he doing
yeah,
today? What's he eating to get better? Right? Like, did he
yeah,
stretch today? Was he a little tight today? I want to hear all that stuff, right?
yeah, yeah.
um but it's really fascinating. And then, the other part, right, is becoming that authority source, or that authoritative source on that topic. And I remember when I was starting my LLC, and there was a lot of people around me that were saying, well, why would like why would anyone take your opinion over another industry perspective? Everything that you're going to tell them or say to them, they can Google, they can find themselves, they can do it themselves, all that sort of stuff. How are you going to make your voice, you know, be heard, in a way that people will take it as an authoritative, voice,
Mhm.
right? Are you going to like go talk at conferences or something? And I haven't talked at a conference yet. I hopefully will within the next couple of years. I gotta get the PhD done first, but in hearing that, it's funny, right? When I hear the critiques, when I hear the but what ifs, or all these rebuttals, they kind of like go in one ear and out the other for me personally. I guess I'm like a bit more on the like entrepreneur side, because to me, I'm just like, well, what do I have to lose? Like, tell me what I have to lose. I have nothing to lose. Okay, well, I'm not going to make an idiot out of myself on LinkedIn
Mm.
or on Twitter saying some controversial cybersecurity topic or whatever. But over time, when you're posting regularly, when you're creating a blog, when you're creating a podcast, when you're going and you're talking on other podcasts, when you're, you know, talking at events for companies that are launching products and they want you, to be the keynote speaker of it, right? Something I've done. Um, all of those things build off of one another, and they give you that authoritative voice in the field, in your specialty. And it adds to that personal brand.
No, totally. And I think today, I'm not gonna say it's easy because obviously it's not easy. You have to put the effort, and you have to, again, have the expertise, put in the time, but it's definitely possible. And something, and 20 years ago, it wasn't like that, even, you know, podcast didn't even exist, right? And not anyone could have a radio show, right? Not
Mhm.
anyone could be on TV, right? Not Twitter didn't exist, whatever, right? So like now with social media in particular, uh, you can, and especially if you're smart about it, as you mentioned, right? For example, you can, the malware example, right? You put a great, you well thought research piece on that, right? Put it on LinkedIn and then put $200, right, to promote it between the folks in the US in the industry that you talked about that have malware in their about us that are directors and above, right? So with $500, right, you, and obviously assuming again to what we were saying before, it has to be good content, right? It has to be, you need to be adding value, right? But if you do that right, you're suddenly in front of the top 200 folks that you could, never imagine that would be looking at your content, and now perhaps a few of them already follow you, right? And then you'll be in their faces, right? And then after you recognize them with a smart remarketing campaign, every single post doesn't have to be a long form research piece, but now every update, every post, every 30-second video, right? You're constantly in front of them, right? So that is possible today. Yeah, if your content is not good, yeah, they're not gonna see you, they're gonna block you. If you don't know, again, those little tricks, you might just put it on your blog and good luck, somebody finding it. But again, if you're smart on how to go about it, you can. I mean, you definitely have a shot. You're playing in the game, right? It's not pay to play anymore. Like anyone can play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is there any part of that that you would change, take out, or add in for small and medium businesses when you're, consulting for clients that are in the cybersecurity space that maybe specialize in different areas, or, like my friend's company, who is essentially a managed services provider that adds, enhanced value with the experts he brings to the table.
Yeah, you mean in terms of what advice would I give them, right, on how
Right.
to perhaps, let's say shifting gears, not only now thinking as a maybe a solo person, but like now as a company.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I always, I mean, we refer to a lot of times the crawl, walk, run approach, right? And I think obviously, it's self-explanatory in a way, but what I mean with that is that you need to have your base covered first. You need to know really your industry, your niche. In marketing, we call something ICP, your ideal customer profile, right? You cannot be selling everything to everybody. And after you have that right, like you need to know who you're talking to and what to tell to that person. For example, we're talking about the malware example, right? Okay, we are focusing on malware. Okay, who buys malware, right? Protection or exactly the consulting or the services that I'm providing. Okay, is it really like where's my experience, right? Is it for financial companies? Their problems are probably different than as like banks' problems are probably different than, for example, e-commerce, retail, right? And retail. So like once you choose that, right, you really know, not only saying, if you have a malware product, no, find me. No, if you're talking to a bank, now you're saying, okay, if you have, you know, and then you define the problem of the, let's say, even if it's regional bankers and not Bank of America, 'cause Bank of America, they probably have their own, right? Regional banks usually have these malware issues and these are the solutions. Now and after you have that position, you need to start there with your positioning. And then after that, okay, your website needs to reflect that, right? Only after you have a website that reflects that, like that look modern, then you can say, okay, let me try some paid media around this, right? What am I getting at? What do I want to get out of it? So it's like again, it's really important to understand what do you need as the base before you go crazy spending thousands of dollars in paid media if you're not even sure who you're talking to, what you're offering, or what content piece are you gonna send them next.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's this whole area, right, is it's interesting to me because it's something, totally different that I've never had to think about before, and now I feel like now more than ever, I definitely have to, consider it and think about the marketing and the personal branding side of things. And I heard a quote recently, right, where one income is like you're standing, in a bad storm on one leg, and it doesn't make any sense for people nowadays, especially with, layoffs on the rise. I mean, what was it? Intel said that they're gonna lay off 20,000 people. I mean that's insane to think because just 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean they were the market leader. Like they were the one. If you were in that kind of specialty, I mean you wanted to work at Intel. And now, not that people don't want to work at Intel necessarily, but but they're letting all those people go, you know, and a
Yeah.
lot of those people built their entire careers and lives on being at Intel, and they've never taken the time to do any sort of side work, to develop a personal brand, to do anything else. And they may be in a situation they have to like partially reinvent themselves, even to an extent.
Mhm. And I think the good part about what we were talking earlier about focusing, not only, yeah, even from let's say from a personal branding perspective, focusing on a niche, on a technology, on an industry, right? Is that whether it's to grow your personal brand and potentially your own business, also to add value to potential employers, because especially now with AI, you need, you know, pe- generalists, those are the first ones, right? They're gonna get caught. They're gonna and have a hard time finding another job, right? Whereas if you are the best, or there's companies that are gonna look, obviously, to try to look for specializations that are in high demand and growing. But if you're one of those, I think you'll always be able to find a company that you can add value to.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, it's a crazy time that we're living in right now. You know, because it's like all the market data that you see coming out about the economy says that the economy is strong, it's humming along, it's moving. But then you see all these layoffs. You know, you see all these people out of work for 12 months. I have a good friend who thankfully just landed another job, but he's been laid off for almost a year, you know, and
Hmm.
he's experienced in the field. You know, he's been a director and everything. He's been in the weeds and tools and domains and whatnot and worked his way up. And it took him almost a year to find a job. I mean,
Hmm.
how many people really have a year's worth of income to saved up, you know, just ready to go? Not a
Yeah,
lot of people, you know,
yeah,
not very many.
yeah. No, I agree. I think obviously that's mostly because of the AI wave. Uh, I think it's still there's still time, to ride the wave and not let it run over you. But I think the clock that is definitely ticking. But again, I think there's time. Again, and if you specialize, especially, also, like, even like how to use AI in your niche, in your industry, right? Like the owners of the companies, they don't have the time. They're looking for that talent. They won't learn it themselves. I mean, some, yeah, some might, especially younger founders and business owners or younger executives. But like usually companies, they just want to find somebody that knows how to do that, right? And again, even today, especially big companies, they move really slow. So if you try and you do a project, they will hire you and they'll pay you three times more that you were earning, just because you can implement that practice, for that company. So again, I do think that we're still early enough where you can see it as an opportunity. But yeah, but you need to get going, get
Yeah.
moving, start moving.
What are some things that you would recommend to people to kind of get ahead of this AI boom slash bubble, right? Like I feel like in the economy it's a bubble, but in the real world it's a boom where, you know, people that aren't constantly evolving, constantly changing how they approach things and
Hmm.
specialties and whatnot, they're going to be the first ones to go, right?
Hmm.
What would you recommend for people to, you know, maybe adjust and beat the AI to still remain marketable, you know, in the marketplace? And this goes for, you know, companies, small, medium enterprises or businesses, to just the individual.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Uh, I'll talk about marketing because I think, I want to provide concrete examples, right? I think it's going to be, and then people can see how they apply that to their
Mm,
fields. Um, you One of the things, for example, is that you need to really break down what are people getting paid for, right? For example, in marketing, right? let's say before, 5 years ago, before AI, not to go too far behind, but only, yeah, 4 or 5 years ago, people would get paid to, for example, create a website, right? And then and write the copy that would go on the website, right? And they would get paid to set up an email campaign, select the audience that email is going to go there, design the email, send the email, see how many people opened that email and clicked, and when they click, like all of that, people will get paid to do that, right? So okay, so now what can AI do today, and what will AI be able to do probably in the next year or so? Okay, AI, they could design a website actually, and they could even write what you do. Okay, uh, interesting. Okay, but can they, for example, write it in a way that differentiates you? So maybe you specialize in copywriting for that niche, and then not you need to leverage ChatGPT, right? But like the final touches to the AI copy that truly makes it unique, right? So that's something that AI won't be able to do for at least a few years, right? Because I guarantee you that they're not thinking about specializing in that industry, for example, or in email marketing, right? Okay, yeah, AI, they can create workflows where they do all of that, but the orchestrator, yeah, they're not there, right? So if you can be the one that creates the workflows, right, and orchestrate it and connect CRM tools with email marketing and cold email, and then with the website and the forms, right? And if you can generate those workflows, you're gonna be ahead, right? Because the tools are not there yet, right? So you need to be thinking, a couple years ahead of what AI is not able to do, right? And then become the expert at that today. That would be my advice.
Hmm. Yeah, we're in a fascinating time, right? Where things aren't necessarily changing right now, right? But they're very quickly able to change
Hmm.
very rapidly as AI gets better and smarter and is more capable. Which is it puts the world itself into no man's land where we've never been before, where probably countries are going to have to figure out like a universal basic income,
Hmm.
just for people to like stay, above water, right? Like because there's going to be
Yeah.
such a major shift that it's going to affect everything.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's threatening, it's scary to think about it. I think in general, the world is progressing, and the quality of life is improving every time more, even if obviously there's differences in from countries and even from social classes in a particular country. But let's say I'm a positivist in general, that overall things are improving. But yeah, as you mentioned, right, that doesn't mean that it's not scary to think that, yeah, I've been working in this field for 20 years, potentially I could be out of a job and then earning basic income, and okay, yeah, I'll have what to eat, and I'll survive. But like, how about a purpose in life, right? That's also very important, right? What is my purpose going to be? um but at least, again, it's a type of problem that you have time to think about, and you can reposition yourself and you can figure it out, right? And it's definitely a better problem to have than, oh, I was killed in World War I, or by a disease that there was no cure for, which was the case 50, 100, and 200 years ago. So I don't know, that's at least what makes me feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. I guess it's something to look forward to out of it all.
No, but and I think ultimately, and I'm sure especially the audience of your podcast, people that have a couple of years, or at least a few years of experience in, in the corporate world, or that are college grads, I think it again, I think they are well positioned to be with highly paying jobs, not just universal income, right? But again, they just need to find a way to ride the wave, you know. But again, I think there's still time. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. Well, Carlos, we're unfortunately at the top of our time here, but I had a fantastic conversation. It's you never really know when you're going into the podcast, right? Because I rarely do prep calls. so so when you don't do a prep call, you really don't know what you're
yeah.
going to get and whatnot. And some people freeze up when you hit the record button. But it was a great conversation overall. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks, Joe. I agree. I enjoyed it a lot. And I think it goes better when you don't do so much prep. I think that the nat yeah natural conversations. I think people feel when they're natural and not too much too prepared. So I like to like I also have a podcast. It's about marketing, and I also don't do any much prep, other than just make sure that we're discussing topics where the guests are experienced and in particularly passionate about, and that's really all that matters. But yeah, but thanks for having me, Joe. I really enjoyed it, and glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Carlos, before I let you go, how about you tell my audience where they could find you if they wanted to connect with you personally, and then where they could find your company if they wanted to learn more and maybe reach out to get some help.
Yeah. The name of the agency, of my agency, it's Condor, like the bird. So condoragency.com. Again, we're focused on tech services, particularly mid-market, B2B. Um, so definitely, check out the site. My email is my first dot last name at condoragency.com. So Carlos dot corridor at Condor Agency. So feel free to reach out. LinkedIn, I'm relatively active on LinkedIn as well. So if you put Carlos Corredor Condor, you'll find me there. So yeah, by all means, feel free to reach out if you need any advice, any help, with your marketing.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this